Question in the back of your mind. What do you value? It's a very simple question, but there's many different answers. It's a very simple question, but your answer determines where you stand with God. In Proverbs chapter 16, verse 3, which we read just a moment ago, it says, "Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established." It tells where our commitments are. It answers that your answer to this question displays how every single person in this building's life looks. And so I ask again, what do you value? The story that always comes to my mind when it comes to values has always been the rich young ruler. If you will, flip over to Matthew chapter 19. We're going to read some verses from there. Matthew chapter 19, we're going to start in verse 16. It says, "Now behold, one came and said to him, 'Good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?' So he said to him, 'Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, and that is God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments.' He said to him, 'Which ones?' Jesus said, 'You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself.' The young man said to him, 'All these things I have kept from my youth. What do I still lack?' Jesus said to him, 'If you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me.' But when the young man heard this saying, he went away sorrowfully, for he had great possessions." He was so close to being considered perfect, as Jesus says it in this passage, but he went away sorrowfully, for he had great possessions. And we see where his values were. We see the lot of the rich young ruler in us. When our worldly desires in this life start to creep in, they always seem to want to overcome the spiritual ones. When we get to the point where the worldly things are overcoming the spiritual ones, we have to know when to take a step back. We have to know to do the right thing. And you can have a ton of different values in this life, but God has to be number one, plain and simple. And don't get me wrong, I love doing fun stuff. I love playing sports. I love hanging out with friends, all the stuff. But when our worldly desires are outdoing our spiritual ones, we have to know when we have to take a step back. Because no matter what you do in this life, whatever, how much you love to do something, God loves you more than that. I promise He does. And are we going to be able to match His love? Absolutely not. But how much effort are we willing to give to try? 1 John 4:19 says, "We love Him because He first loved us." So when I ask you the question, what do you value? And your first answer isn't God, that's where your problem is. Should you value family, friends? Of course. But God has to be number one and never lower. And why is He number one? Because He's the one that's going to lead you in the right direction 100% of the time and never lower. So I want us to think about this. If God's willing to lead us in the right direction, if God's willing to give us whatever He has for us 100% of the time, then why aren't we? And the thing that all of life wraps around, the thing that we base everything on in this life is time. And let me tell you something. Our clocks are always ticking. What you value in this life is where you're going to spend the most of your time. Even towards the beginning of time, we had Noah. If you would, flip over to Genesis chapter 6. We're going to read a few verses from there. Starting in verse 5, it says, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that He had made man on the earth, and He was grieved in His heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I had made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord because his values were where they were supposed to be. His values were different from the rest of the world. Noah wasn't spending his time on evil things. If we go to Ezekiel, in Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 14, it says, "Even if these men Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it. They would deliver only themselves by their righteousness, says the Lord God. Here it's talking about how God would punish these large amounts of people due to their unfaithfulness to Him. And He mentions 3 men that even though everything around them, everyone around them was falling apart, these 3 men stayed faithful. Job, Daniel, and Noah. With Job, everything that he had was being taken away from him. Everything was going away. But he stayed faithful, and God blessed him. Daniel, instead of spending his time on worldly things, he spent his time praying to God. His values weren't pleasing others, but God. And Noah, he didn't let everyone around him stopping him from doing what he needed to do. And what if we took these principles in our lives? What if we had Job's patience with God, knowing that God was going to be with us no matter what was happening in our lives, knowing that it was all going to be okay? What if we had Noah's persistence, his work ethic, waking up every day knowing that God was going to wipe out the earth, knowing that everything on the ark had to be perfect, knowing that he could just fall in line like everybody else, but going against the odds? Believing that God was telling the truth and never turning back around. Now we just use the term never give up, and Noah didn't. I've been to that ark that's in Kentucky a couple times, and it's big, like really big. But the thing about it is, Noah didn't have all these machines, all these things that they used to build the one in Kentucky. He just used himself. He had hard work. He stayed faithful to God, even when it was hard. And finally, we have Daniel's mindset. He was one of those people that could say that he actually died for God. He was perfectly consistent to the point that he was despised for how good that he was. And that's a Jesus quality. And you could clearly see that in Daniel. I couldn't imagine being so good that people despised me for how good that I was. In this life, there comes a time where you have to stop and think about, am I doing the right things? And my answer to you would be, well, that's between you and God. But let me tell you this. If you don't take anything else away from tonight's lesson, I want you to take this. In life, what you don't decide to change is what you're choosing to do. If you're looking at your life and you're doing something wrong, you need to fix it. If you're doing something that God says that you shouldn't be doing, you need to fix it. If you aren't right with God, you need to fix it. Because in life, if you aren't choosing to be better, that's you being okay with being bad. And you can blame whoever you want. You can complain as much as you want, but you're the one choosing to do nothing about it. I want all of us to ask ourselves tonight, are we serious about changing? Because if you're truly serious about changing, then you're going to be able to find a way. But if not, all you're going to do is find an excuse. But what's going to change? Seriously, what's going to change? Because we can go year after year in saying that we're going to make that change. But we don't. We say that we're going to make that change, and yeah, we try sometimes, but we get busy. We give up because we get too tired. We say that we don't have the energy. But do we not spend almost every single day on social media filling our minds with things that we don't need? Do we not spend our days every single day with negative people? In this life, we go challenge after challenge. We make so many decisions. We have so many situations. We do all these things in life, hang around all these people, and we don't change anything about our lives. And we're expecting something to change whenever we aren't even doing anything to change ourselves. So let me ask you, what's going to change? Before these lessons, they always ask me for a title. For this lesson, I chose the greatest investment. And you may ask, well, what is this investment? We've talked about a lot of different things tonight. We talked about values. We talked about change. Let's go to Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul? It all adds up. You can invest every single worldly thing that you have in this life. But the greatest investment that you can make is to help your soul. You know how I said earlier that God has to be number one? And the reason He is because He's with you 100% of the time? Well, I 100% guarantee you that there's a really good reason that after we pass, the soul is the only thing we have left. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul? And let me tell you, the answer to that question is absolutely nothing. So let me go back to the question. What do you value? There are so many different ways that you can spend your time. Why choose the wrong things? It all goes back to God wasn't being number one. The time you're spending in this life, is it helping your soul? A lot of the times is the excuse is, well, this is what I enjoy doing. These are the things that make me happy. But let me tell you something. I'm in the church doors every time the doors are open. But there's still been times in my life that as a Christian that I wasn't putting in my time for God. If we only go to church as our time for God, that's 4 hours a week. And don't get me wrong, we all have certain things in this life that just simply take up time. But 4 hours isn't a lot. I've been a Christian for a little over 2 years now. And I've had happiness in my journey with God. I've had sadness. I've had anxiety. I've had really bad anxiety. I've had anger. I've had a lot of different emotions. I've been so stressed out and anxious over worldly things that I'm almost getting no sleep. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. My goals aren't where they need to be. I've been so stressed out over worldly things that I'm so mentally drained. I am not functioning properly. I've been so anxious that I've lost a part of me because I can't act the way that I need to act. But you know what I did to fix all those things? I started to change things. I started to change certain aspects of my life. I started to get rid of a lot of things that I didn't need in my life because I knew that I had to. I started letting spiritual matters control what was going to make me happy. If you want true happiness, look to God. That's what I started doing, and it's helped me more than I could ever imagine. All the worries, all the negative people who were causing all this anxiety, causing all of this worry, I was getting rid of it. And it helped me more than I would ever know. And as I stand here tonight and ask myself, what caused me to change? What caused me to do this? What sparked? What did I start to value? I started valuing God. I started spending my time on Him. I started investing in my soul. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 22 through 24, it says that you put off, concerning your former conduct, the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and being renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. That old man that it's talking about, your old self, old being in the past, but more specifically, old meaning that there can be a new. And for those of you who take God seriously, you know what this new feels like. You know it feels better than anything you could imagine. If you're putting in that effort to become new, if you're putting in that effort to actually change, you're doing the best possible thing that you could be doing. Because there's no possible way into heaven without becoming new and making changes for Jesus. John chapter 14 and verse 6, it says, Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There comes a time in this life where we have to stop. We have to sit. We have to realize that we have to start investing in our souls. Because eventually the time that you had, the time that I was talking about earlier, it's still ticking. And eventually that time's going to run out. And all the time that He gave you, He knows what you did with every single second that He gave you. And you can say you're serious about God as much as you want, but He knows. I look at all the youth here tonight that we have for Youth Unite, and most of us were at camp just a month ago. On Thursday night, when I had my final thought, the last thing that I said was, don't let worldly people put out your fire for God. Well, where are we at now? And this goes for all of us. Even for the youth. School's been out for a couple of weeks now. But you know where you're at. You know if your fire is out. And this goes for all of us. This fire, this passion that we have for God, this fire that's driving us for wanting to go to heaven. When someone makes you choose to change against God, that's how they put out your fire. Camp was just a month ago. But everyone's different at camp, aren't they? Everyone's different in different environments, aren't they? When we make that change against God, when we make that change for good like we do at camp, when we're in that good environment with all these people, when we're living our best life for God up there, we're the most positive people, why do we change back? When we're in our best environments, why do we change like we're in a bad environment? And let me tell you, the reason why we go back, the reason why we go back to that bad environment, state of mind, is because you decided to make a choice. But you can start investing in your soul again right now. But first, you have to change. So the question that's been popping up multiple times throughout the lesson, what do you value? But let me change that just a little bit. Where do you want your values to be? And it all starts with you. You can't start investing, though, until you become a Christian. And there's a lot of different fears with not being a Christian. There's the fear with not knowing enough. And let me tell you, I've been there. 7 years ago, we were sitting at camp. It was a Wednesday night, and I was sitting there, went up for the invitation, not really knowing what I was doing. After my dad had a conversation with me, and I remember the exact conversation that we had, he said, hey, but you have sin in your life, right? And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I have sin in my life. But he said, but you haven't done like the really bad sins, right? And I'm like, no, I haven't done any of that, so I'm good. And it's looking back after that, it always scared me because I didn't know enough. And I'd go year after year having that mindset, I don't know enough, I can't be a Christian. I don't know enough, I can't be a Christian yet. It took me 5 years after that moment, almost exactly 5 years, to finally become a Christian. And let me tell you, it was not worth waiting 5 years. Becoming a Christian makes me learn more than I ever had before. The fear of not knowing enough. It's just a distraction. It's just a block for achieving so much more with your faith once you become a Christian. And then there's also the fear of what the world will think. What's this person going to say about me if they know I'm a Christian? Do I have to start acting different if I'm a Christian? Do I have to stop pleasing others when I become a Christian? Do I have to stop getting laughs making fun of other people once I'm a Christian, it's a lot of things we don't want to give up. It's a lot of things that we don't want to come to grips with. But it's something that we have to do. It's something that we have to do because when you become new, when you become a Christian, you have to make a change. But you know what's worse than what the world will think of you after you become a Christian? Try being at Judgment Day after your time has ran out and sitting there looking at Jesus and saying, you know, these people got to go in, these people got to go in. I thought I was just as good as they were. But they made a change. And instead you get the phrase, "Depart from me, I never knew you," for someone that you've been looking at your whole life, but you weren't willing to make that change. And you have to stand there and you have to look at Jesus and you have to say, "Jesus, I ran out of time to do what you told me to do. I didn't make that change in time." And you know how I said Jesus knows what we do with every single second of it? Well, he knows if you had enough time. I want you to ask yourselves tonight, is hell worth the risk of choosing not to change? What's hindering you from making that change? Why aren't we changing? Why are we going back to our old ways and not staying new? We have to choose to change. Tonight, if there's anyone that wants to become a Christian, if there's anyone that is in any need tonight, we can help you. Don't be too late to change for the right things. If we can help you in any way tonight, please come as we stand and as we sing.